Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ask Us Anything, Best Practices for Evaluating Your Food Safety Program. This is our second Ask Us Anything this year. We started with Ask Us Anything, developing a food safety program, and that is up on our YouTube now. So if you want to see kind of the companion to this, feel free. A few housekeeping notes here before we get started. All participants have their audio and video turned off. If you want to ask a question, which we would love to hear from you, you can use the Q&A feature or the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. We will answer questions throughout and at the end as well if you have more. If you want to see us in gallery view or speaker view, you can do that at the top of your screen. So just a little bit about Perennia. Perennia Food and Beverage, Perennia Food and Agriculture, I was reading the sign, supports the growth, transformation, and economic development in Nova Scotia's agriculture, seafood, cannabis, and food and beverage sectors. So we're a big company who do a lot of things. We'll talk a bit more about the kind of things that we do later. But for now, I am joined with our two co-managers of quality and food safety here, Elaine and Shelly. So Shelly develops and facilitates quality and food safety training, and she's really passionate about educating our clients. Knowledge transfer, she is our lead trainer here at Perennia. She assists clients with navigating food safety, regulatory requirements, as well as third-party certifications. She has lots of experience, and she is a great resource. Elaine coaches clients in developing and implementing customized food safety and quality programs, as well as identifying overall process and production efficiencies with the goal of creating a plan that is practical, approachable, easily maintained, and easily managed throughout the growth of the operation. So thank you, Elaine and Shelly. Sec. There we go. All right, let's get started with some questions that we received from people who signed up for this webinar. So, Shelly, could you get us started by introducing some of the terms we will be talking about here? So, internal audit, reassessment, self-assessment.
Sure. Thanks, Carolyn. So going forward today, we're going to use the words interchangeably, but keep in mind internal audit and reassessment and self-assessment, they all mean the exact same thing. So going forward, we're probably going to use the word internal audit. It is a reassessment, guys. So when you do an internal audit, what it is it is a first-party audit, meaning that it is conducted by the facility. Now, keep in mind, you can hire a consultant to do the internal audit on your behalf. But again, you will be ultimately responsible for ensuring that you are up to date with your programs. So why are internal audits important? Internal audits are important because you are ensuring that the process in the system that you have in place is still meeting regulations or requirements, that it is effective and that it is current. And this is done by collecting objective evidence. So the benefits of doing regular internal audits is that you are always ensuring the system and the process is accurate and current, but you're also able to identify where your strengths are and where there's areas for improvement. And of course, when you identify an area for improvement, then you need to act upon those and put measures in place to correct the deficiencies before your auditor or your inspector comes in and identifies those issues, or before it leads to a quality or food safety issue. So your internal audit should be completed throughout the year. Be kind to yourself, guys. You don't want to put more stress on yourself when preparing for your actual audit. So don't leave your internal audit to the last minute. Spread it out through the year and make it make sense for your facility.
Thank you. Elaine and Shelly, what is a common misconception that you see regarding internal auditing and reassessments or self-assessments?
So one of the biggest things that I see is that a lot of people think the internal audit is a simple checklist, and that is not the case at all. And another thing is your daily inspections, the day-to-day inspections that you are doing, those are different from doing an internal audit. So the internal audit, the reassessment, the self-assessment should be a thorough assessment of all aspects of your food safety system. It's looking at all your procedures, all your policies, and all your records. And it's not just saying, do we have a pest control program? But it's the pest control program that we have in place. Does it meet the certification that we have or the regulations? Are the activities that are being performed reflected in the written documentation?
Right, so it's a little bit more in depth than just checking things off.
Absolutely.
So here are some few comments that are questions that we received from the participants. And again, if you are listening to this and you think of a question, please add them in the Q&A and we'll answer them when we can. So regarding allergen policy documentation requirements, how much is too much to ask from co-manufacturers?
You have to ask for, if they're producing your product, you have to know how they're producing it. You have to know that they have an allergen control plan in place that's covered under hazard analysis. Did they train their people? You can't ask enough questions. And if anything, get all that documentation, get your allergen control plan from your co-manufacturer, get the training information or how they train their people. You can ask for records because they are producing your product. Their hazard analysis to make sure they include the correct allergens in even their process flow as well, because you might notice that maybe they use the same equipment to produce your product that doesn't have a certain allergen in it. And I'll recommend here, if you're physically able to do it, please go on site and verify that they're actually doing this. If you can't go on site, get somebody to come in and do a second party audit for you, or get somebody that's knowledgeable in that process to come with you, so you can see and build that confidence, because you're responsible for that. If there's a recall for your product for allergens, you'll be the one that has to answer to it.
Right, ultimately you are responsible for that. Here's another question. I currently sell to retail. Am I required to complete an internal audit?
Well, if you have to have a Safe Food for Canadians license, or if you're third party certified, yes, you need to do an internal audit. How that internal audit looks, it might look more like a reassessment that's the kind of terminology they use for Safe Food for Canadians, or internal audit for any of the GFSI certifications. It could be a self-assessment. If you're Canada Gap, that's how they call that. That's your internal audit, is the self-assessment checklist. So yes, you will be required. If you're not regulated or you're not third party certified, but you're somehow still supplying a retailer, then you really should look at your program, because I'll be surprised if it's not required.
When is the best time to complete an assessment or audit of your program?
So this is going to differ facility to facility, and you have to make it make sense for your site. And what we mean by that is, if you know a lot of folks are on vacation the month of July, you're probably not going to want to do aspects of the internal audit in that month. Also, think of this as a pre-audit assessment, getting ready for the audit and ensuring that your systems and your processes are current and effective. So also, there's templates available out there. So Canada Gap has a self-assessment template. SQF has an internal audit record that you can use. You don't have to make them up yourself. There are resources available to you. If you do not have a guide to go by, then you can look at your last internal audit or your inspections to be able to create those. So it's just going to be dependent on your facility, how busy you are, and the things you are doing, but you need to do your internal audit on all aspects of the food safety system before your audit or your inspections.
I'm going to add to this, Shelly. When people are scheduling out, and yes, you should schedule your internal audit, you might want to hit on any of the hot spots that you were dinged on from your audit previously. You might want to get those taken care of, or look at that section about 6 weeks, even 2 months out, in case it's a repeat, because you definitely don't want that to happen again. like you're not going to probably do the premises outside if it's snowing and your audits in the summertime. You're going to want to wait till it's closer to that date. If you're not producing a sensitive product, and that's including your certification at a certain time of year, you might want to adjust. Like you don't have to go in order. You can jump around to whatever makes sense in your internal audit. So just something to think about.
And also, you can't possibly audit your processing if you're not processing. So keep that in mind as well. If you are auditing any processing aspects of your food safety system, you must be processing the product.
We just received a question in the Q&A that I think you talked about templates. So the question is, how do you do an internal audit? So is that a good place to start, templates, or where do you start with this kind of thing?
So starting with your internal audit is, yeah, there are templates out there, but you have to create a checklist. So there's a whole procedure that you should have in place when you're doing your internal audit. So knowing the schedule, the frequency, who's going to be responsible for doing your internal audits, are those internal auditors trained, who will be the one doing the internal audit on which sections, as well as planning the internal audit, the scope of the internal audit, the questions that are going to be asked during the internal audit. So those are all the things that you want to think about. But by having a checklist in place, it keeps you on track and it allows you to go through and not miss any of those, because you have to do your internal audit on all the food safety pieces. So your pest control, sanitation, traceability, your HACCP plans, your process flows, all of those things.
Do you have anything to add, Elaine, or that pretty much covers it?
No, I think you covered that one, Shelly.
All right. We received another question from our friend Lauren Piercy. We have been involved in many internal audits, supporting our clients with regards to cleaning and sanitation requirements and suggested procedures / improvements. When we are involved in such audits, we do not charge a fee. So the question is, if our involvement is in conjunction with paid outside support from other agencies, would there be any legal requirements or ramifications?
I don't even know how to answer. That's a good question. I wouldn't say, because it's a snapshot in time, right, Shelly? Like when we go in and do an internal audit, we don't guarantee that you're going to ace your audit. You know, it's a snapshot in time. And if your observations are true, that what you're seeing, what the concentrations they're using, the procedures they're following, if you're seeing them follow it right to a T, there shouldn't be any legal ramifications. You know, because it is a snapshot in time. You know, even the audit itself, like they'll see you hopefully at your best. But yeah, that's my thought on it. Shelly, do you?
And also keep in mind, it's the facts. So you're gathering objective evidence. It's not subjective. What are you seeing? You're writing down exactly what you see. And if you are seeing any issues, you want to be able to identify those right away. Now, I will add that if you're doing an internal audit on behalf of a company and you do notice a food safety concern, you're going to have to ensure that they understand that. And it may have to be, you may have to call CFIA depending on what that food safety risk is. So keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you. That segues nicely into another question we received. What is the best way to contact CFIA?
I think the local office might have a 1-800 number, Shelly. You should have, if you have an inspector, you should have contact information. And from my experience, the inspectors are pretty good about emailing back. I think. So if you don't have an inspector, if you're just trying to get a general question into CFIA, you could try the local office. We can I'll find those numbers and we can send those out. Yeah, that would be my guidance on that.
Perfect.
Yeah, and as Elaine already mentioned, if you already have an SFC license in place or you're inspected, you will have an inspector who's in charge, and they will provide you with their phone number and their email, and they normally are pretty good at getting back through email.
Perfect, thank you. Here's another question. I just developed my food safety program. Do I really need to conduct a reassessment or internal audit so soon?
This is a great question. And this is one that we see a lot of facilities have a challenge with. So, yes, the answer is you have to do your internal audit after the development and implementation of your program. And the reason why you do that is during the development and implementation, you may have missed something. So, for example, you've created, let's say, your mock recall procedure in the program, but you go ahead and you're doing your internal audit and you realize that, yes, we have a mock recall program developed. Did we do a mock recall exercise? No, we didn't. So all of these aspects have to be completed before you go through your third-party audit. And another example is, your water quality SOP program that you have in place. You have it all written out, but did you do it? So if you're required to test your water 4 times throughout the year, you need to ensure that you've done those things. So the answer is yes, you must do a thorough internal audit prior to your third party audit.
Great, thank you. How often do you need to conduct an internal audit or reassessment?
Well, if you happen to change your QA staff, like your lead or whoever's managing the program, you have to do it. They should do an internal audit pretty well as soon as they arrive. Not only does it enable, and I'm saying this more for the QAs that do go to a new job, that should be the first thing on your to-do list besides learning the process. For one thing, it'll help you learn the process. It helps you make that connection with everybody on the floor. You get familiar with the program. Maybe you can add something of value you've experienced before in that whole process as well. So whenever a product, or the other thing you could do is the other product, if you have a product or process that's going to change, like somebody brings a new piece of equipment, it should trigger a reassessment. If you have any kind of critical cars or anything that are showing up in inspections or non-conformances, you should redo your internal audit, especially if you didn't catch it on your internal audit. You need to put the focus on those. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Here's a question. I am completely overwhelmed whenever it's time to complete my review. Is there an easier way to do it?
Well, start with your checklist. Do it as a team. It shouldn't fall on the QA's shoulders. So quality is not a department; it's a company-wide commitment. That's been ingrained for me from the start, thanks to a former manager. You need to include everybody who has their hand in any part of your food safety program. People on the floor, it helps to bring them in if you have a lead hand or somebody that knows the process really well. Supervisors, people that do the work in maintenance, bring them in. Your pest control provider. I've done internal audits with the pest control provider, once a year and brought them in and learned what they do. And they learn about what the requirements are for the third-party certification, and it creates a stronger program. Plus, it doesn't leave you up to do it, and it actually forces you, because not everybody has availability on the same day, to spread it out throughout the year. So that's what I recommend. If you're doing it by yourself, you're doing it wrong.
Right. Company-wide commitment.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm not certified yet. Do I need to do an annual review of my program?
Even if you are not certified to say Canada GAP, SQF, BRCGS, if you have a food safety management system, then you need to be doing an internal audit to ensure that it is current and that it is effective. And again, it has to be completed at least once a year, but it is in your best interest to spread it out throughout the year.
Thank you. Here's another one, a bit of a longer one. I am find I'm the only QA person on staff. I end up doing the reviews myself, find aspects that I'm unable to correct or complete on my own. It just becomes a corrective action report writing exercise. How do you tackle this?
So again, it's going to depend on the size of the facility. I've worked with facilities that have a QA department, and then I've worked with facilities that have 2 people running the whole thing. So if you're a company that has 2 people, then you may be the one that's doing all the work. However, keep in mind, like we mentioned earlier, you can always hire a consultant to come in and do parts of your internal audit for you or to do the entire internal audit for you. If you are going to be the only one doing the internal audit at your facility, it should be acknowledged and documented in your food safety system. Um, if it's becoming a car exercise, then you may want to take a look at the bigger picture to determine whether or not you have a breakdown in your food safety system. Any deficiencies that are noted during the internal audit, they have to be taken care of. So you need to look at what's the corrective action you're going to do, what is the root cause, what preventive actions that you can put in place. And these can normally be done. Most people's reports will include that information. So what the deficiency is, what the corrective action is, root cause, and so on. So you don't have to fill out a separate corrective action sheet. So basically you fill it out in one spot, and then when your inspector or your auditor comes in, you can show them that you've identified the deficiencies and here are all the things you've done to correct them, as opposed to writing up a corrective action when you've already identified all of those things and outlined them on your internal audit report.
I think I want to add to that too, is I've had local businesses that are quite small and budget is tight. They've actually joined forces with another local food operation or called a friend to help them go through that has like audit experience. Like anybody financial would know how to do an audit. So you know, don't widen your window out when you're looking for support conducting your internal audit.
I got a question here. Is there resources for newcomers to food safety, like starting from A to Z? And before you guys jump in with an answer, I want to mention that we did, like I said earlier, and Ask Us Anything on developing a food safety program a couple weeks ago. So that is up on our YouTube. That might be a good place to start. But do you have any other advice for, like startups, newcomers to the food or beverage business?
So many people don't realize that the Perennia website, under the Quality and Food Safety tab, we have free resources. They are free. And you will find anything from developing a pest control program to a robust sanitation to do an environmental monitoring, how to create a food safety program. We have templates there, internal audit. Fact sheets are there as well. We offer free webinars as well as have training that you do have to pay for. So we have internal audit training, we have root cause analysis training. So there's lots of different resources available to you. And it's not just Perennia. There are other sites that you can go to, like Quality and Food Safety, that have this information available.
CFIA also has lots of great resources,
They
templates,
do. Yeah.
interactive tools. Like it's a really good place to start as well. Here's another question we received. Not really an audit question per se. We have received various requests on how to or where to acquire information on swabbing procedures, ATP, environmental, etc. What is the best way to advise this question? Where do you redirect the customer?
So is the question the customer is asking your facility to start conducting swabs?
This is another question from Lauren at Sanimark, so I guess it would be as a consultant. How to acquire information on swabbing procedures, etc.
So we
Um,
also have
yeah.
resources on swabbing procedures, but it's going to depend on what swabbing is required as well. So Health Canada has a listeria policy, and if you fall in any of those categories that require listeria swabbing, there's information and it's clearly outlined in there depending on what category you are. And then in terms of ATP swabbing, where you're looking at the effectiveness of sanitation, this is going to be based on what makes sense for your facility. How many food contact surfaces do you have? How often are you processing? What is your sanitation? And normally they can reach out to the sanitation company that they're using as well, where they are the experts. They can also help assist with determining how frequently they should be checking this. But it's going to depend on the risk of your food that you're processing as well, too. Keep that in mind.
And ATP manufacturers have directions on how to swab videos. Hygiena definitely does. I think 3M does too. I think some of these swab companies, you can actually lease a machine to try it out and see which one works best for you. I know people have done that with 3M, I think. I'm not sure about Hygiena. And if you get swabs from a lab, they should have instructions given to you on how to swab or what their expectations are. So that's also a good resource. I mean, we have some resources as well about environmental monitoring on our website and with Perennia Academy. So yeah, and I guess if you don't know where to send them to us and we'll see if we can redirect them, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. When we do a thorough internal audit ourselves, why does the auditor inspector still find deficiencies? What are we missing?
Well, you're missing something in your internal audits, what you're missing. Did you actually, I mean, I like to give, when you look at a program, say if you had a program for 10 years, I see this quite a bit. Somebody's had a program for 5 to 10 years. Same old pest control guy comes in, does his thing, maintenance is the same. We haven't changed anything. So it becomes more of a check mark writing exercise, to be honest. They don't actually sit down and compare the standard or the regulation to what's actually written in the procedures. You know, are you physically looking, maybe look at a bigger selection of records or look at them frequently throughout the year to make sure they are getting, put a detailed look on them, make sure they're actually getting filled out. Most of the time, well, the other reason it could be too is if you misunderstand or misinterpret the standard compared to the auditor, you know, different interpretations, or maybe something has changed along the line. They have seen quite a few facilities. So, I mean, they know the standard, but you know your product. So just make sure you have all those bases covered when you're doing your internal audit or your reassessment, even your self-assessment, like you're actually looking at the SOPs and the records.
Thank you. Does the person or the team responsible for conducting the internal audits or reassessments, do they require training?
So this is going to depend on the wording in your certification. But yes, ultimately, the person that's responsible for doing your internal audit is going to require training. Does it have to be formal training? Like I said, go back to the certification just to make sure that you read all the wording clearly. The person that has received the formal internal audit training can train in-house, meaning they can train other staff members on internal audits. If you are doing this type of training with your staff, just make sure you have the records. So all the training records for those who you trained on the internal audit procedures. So, for example, if you are using, like Elaine had mentioned, the phone a friend, if you're bringing in somebody from another company to do parts of your internal audit, or you've hired a consultant to do parts of your internal audit, you're going to want to have their training record on file because the auditor will ask for that.
Thank you. The question is, does this have to be a formal process? So I guess this is relating to internal audits as a whole. Do they have to be really formally done, I guess?
They can be. I think it helps to keep your focus to make them formal, sit everybody down or sit whatever section, whoever's doing this with you down and treat it like through the eyes of an actual auditor. I do find there's more success that way because it helps you keep your focus. Is there a requirement for that? Not in the standards I work with, but it does help to maintain that focus. So I guess it depends on what works for you. If the formal helps everybody, you know, keep their auditor hat on and really give a good view of the process and your records and procedures and what everybody's doing out there, great, do it that way. If an informal, it works better for you because it makes it not so scary. Sure. But I mean, you know, either way, it's a practice run for your actual audit. So keep that in mind and, you know, interview your employees too, because it helps them practice and explain why you're interviewing them. So they feel more at ease when the actual auditor shows up.
I'm just going to add on to that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So when, like Elaine said, there's no requirements in terms of doing it formally or informally. It has to make sense for your facility. If you do a more formal aspect, so a notification of the internal audit, an opening meeting, going through the agenda with everybody, presenting the findings, doing a close-in meeting, this is what your inspectors and the auditors do. So it will make you more familiar with the process that you will go through, and it will build your confidence as well. But at the end of the day, no, you definitely do not have to do that. As long as you do your internal audit and you have the proof, the records showing your findings, that objective evidence, that's all you need. And then, of course, any deficiencies that you've noted, you have to do the corrective actions and root cause and preventive measures as well.
I should add to that, if you do your internal audit and one of your corrective actions requires bringing in capital or fixing an entire floor or something, and you have to kind of schedule that in, it's not going to get done before the audit. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get a non-conformance for it, but it's really impressive if you've created a plan, you have quotes, the process is all there, and it's really, depends on your auditor and the food safety risk at hand if they're going to mark you down for that, or maybe they'll not mark you as hard. So either way, you're ahead of the game if the auditor picks up on it.
Thank you. You were talking earlier, Elaine, about interviewing people and throughout this process. So who are you interviewing? And I guess, do you have to do this from behind a desk, or how do you do it?
Some of the best conversations I've had is beside equipment, while they're harvesting, while they're working. So no, you're better off to do it on the floor because you can't do QA behind a desk. I don't care where you work. You have to be boots on the ground. You learn a lot from people through their actions, just even walking out every day. If they only see you during the internal audit or when you go out and criticize them, you're probably not going to have a very good internal audit because they're going to say, oh no, here she comes again, or here he comes again. So yeah, get out on the floor and talk to people and kind of watch the process.
Thank you. You were talking earlier, Shelly, as well about objective evidence. What does that mean exactly?
So objective evidence is collecting the facts. What are you seeing? Keep in mind, it is objective, not subjective. So you want to put in only the information and factual information. Another thing is when people are doing good, praise them for that. So give kudos where kudos are due. Elaine mentioned a few minutes ago, oh, here she comes again. All she goes on about is the negative, the negative, the negative. That's not what you want. You want, yes, absolutely. When there are deficiencies, you have to let people know, relevant staff members, you have to communicate all of this because it can't continue to go on. You have to correct those deficiencies. However, when people are doing good jobs all the time, then it's important to say, you're wearing your hairnet right, or, I've acknowledged that you're doing this correctly. Thank you. Continue to do the good job that you're doing. Another thing, people get nervous when they're doing their internal audits or going through an actual audit. Use this as a learning opportunity. Really look at and be honest with yourself. Where are our strengths and where are the areas we can improve? I don't care how long you've been working at a facility or how long or how much experience you have. Nothing is 100% all the time. Things are going to happen. And things typically happen during the internal audit or during an actual audit. It's how you handle those things that's going to matter. And I just want to go back to can an audit happen from behind a desk? Remember, this isn't a simple checklist. You are printing off those procedures, those policies, and those records, and you're going out to the floor where they are happening, and you're looking at that SOP, and then you're looking at what's going on. So how can you possibly audit from behind a desk if you're not on the floor watching what's going on in real life?
Right? You might write something down in your plan and then find out that's not actually how it happens in real life. The team have found an easier way or a better way to do it or a different way, right?
And that's normally what happens when
Yeah.
you develop and implement your programs. So you've developed something and it sounds really good to you, but when you go out there and you're working with the boots on the ground, the people that's doing those everyday activities, you realize this isn't going to work for them. Or this record, there's not enough room, or you've duplicated stuff. So it has to make sense.
Yeah, and we talked as well about in the previous webinars about making sure the policies are readable or easy to understand for the team members. So making sure they're in a language they understand, or they're, maybe recorded in audio instead of just visual, so that everyone can actually apply our procedures. That might also help.
Yeah, and even when you're training or whatever, that's the same thing. It's kind of off topic here, but you got to make sure it's the appropriate for the audience. Even your internal audit, like maybe people who have a lot of anxiety, when you mention audit, and really if you just go out and talk with them one-on-one and go over that portion of the program that they're in charge of, and that the auditor's going to hit them up and interview them, having that one-on-one with them without having to worry about repercussions will put their mind at ease, and you'll get a much better interview out of that operator during the audit.
Absolutely, thank you. So should you share your internal audit results or your reassessment results with senior management?
Always. And even senior management should be in there with you. Depends on how big your facility, I guess. But yes, they need to know what's going on. Senior management is going to be at the audit, or they have to be. So they need to be aware of any deficiencies or issues or where you need the support going forward. I mean, if you have challenges where you're continually writing corrective actions year after year for the same portions of your internal audit, having that sit down with them and explaining why this is important and why this is a struggle as it is right now, will help get you the support you need.
Even if that's financial support to buy
Yeah,
equipment or, fix things.
replace a floor or put another
Right.
staff member in, or, that kind of thing.
Will my internal audit results affect my third-party audit or inspection results?
Oh, this is a good one. We sometimes see facilities purposely not identify deficiencies because they are afraid that if they identify it, it is going to affect their third-party results. If you do not identify it, eventually it is going to get picked up by your auditor or your inspector. So it is in your best interest to note these deficiencies and all of the things that you have put in place to correct and prevent them from recurring. Another thing is just going back to the objective evidence. The only way to gather objective evidence is by looking at the written documents, going out on the floor, having a conversation, a little chit chat, as well as watching what's going on. So you're going to have that talking piece, you're going to have that observation piece, as well as the document and record review. And if you are ticking the boxes knowingly, knowing that there's a deficiency, that's fraudulent. So you shouldn't be just doing a check mark exercise. This is be honest with yourself. It is in your best interest to look at any deficiencies and put those controls in place.
It does get easy. It does get hard to do an internal audit year after year, especially if you're 5 to 10 years out of it. So, make sure you keep yourself honest. I think that's why it's important to do it as a team. Change up your team every once in a while. Maybe do it with the supervisors. Maybe you can pull somebody from the floor. If you can't pull them from the floor, see if you can interview them in between changeovers or something. Just to even talk about a procedure. Just, you got to make that effort.
Yeah, you said it's in your best interest, but it's also in your customer's interest, your staff's best interest to create the safest product you can, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you don't want to make anybody sick, right? It's
Right.
about safeguarding the public.
Yeah.
And keep in mind too, you must be independent of that section of your food safety system. So if Elaine's the one who created the HACCP plan, then Elaine shouldn't be auditing the HACCP plan. I could do that piece. If I'm the one who developed the sanitation program, then I shouldn't be the one that's auditing the sanitation program. But remember, I mentioned this earlier, if you're a facility that only has 2 people, you may have to do that. You just have to acknowledge and document that.
It's not ideal. Definitely doesn't make it easy. It doesn't matter how small or large your process is. This is always a fairly large undertaking. Just with the day-to-day stuff that goes on, you know, production still has to run, product has to go out the door. I mean, yeah.
So that's really interesting. I didn't know that you couldn't be the one to do the audit yourself if you were the one who wrote the program, unless, yeah.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but it does happen, especially in the Maritimes.
Wow,
You know, I don't think it's exclusive to us at all, but it does happen, and it's definitely not ideal. And it's the easiest, you know, when you audit your own stuff, you can miss stuff pretty quickly, so.
yeah, like reading a document over and over and over again, and you don't see typos anymore.
Exactly.
Right?
It's the same. Yeah.
Yeah. What other mistakes have you seen with the internal audit process?
Staff that are not trained. So that's a big one, is really understanding the internal audit process, how you have to do it, being aware that it is looking at the documentation, going out to the floor, interviewing the employees, doing the observations. Another thing that we see is some people get overwhelmed because when they walk on that processing floor, instead of keeping the scope in mind of what they're auditing, all of a sudden their eyes are going everywheres, and it can become very overwhelming. Another thing we see is people that are responsible for doing the internal audits are sometimes afraid to let senior management know that there's problems because they don't want them to come back and say, well, you know, you're overseeing that. Why is that happening? But again, Elaine mentioned earlier, this is a company-wide commitment. We are all responsible for food safety at the end of the day, every single person. Not addressing deficiencies. You start, you do your internal audit, you notice a deficiency, and then you don't go any further. Or you initiate the corrective action and you don't close it off. So we've seen that. Last minute internal audits. You can't possibly audit your entire food safety system in a day or 2 days. There are so many components to it. So spread it out throughout the year. This isn't cramming for a final exam. This is being honest to yourself and to the facility.
And just like when you're getting ready for the audit, you can't load everything on a trailer and hide it. It's really soul crushing when you see that as a QA person. When you see the trailers back up and all the old stuff goes out and you're like, great. And then as soon as the auditor leaves the parking lot, it all comes back in. It's just sad. Don't do that. Even with your internal audit, anything you identify, that's got to get corrected. I am going to add to what Shelly was mentioning too. Sometimes your internal audits for some of the standards are quite large. So to go back and try and remember to close out those corrective actions, it might help to copy and paste them in a separate document. So you have that other document to go through as a list, like a to-do list for yourself. That's super handy for any kind of long internal audits. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything else there. You know, red tape. You know, it's sad when it happens when you kind of get red tape and you can't close a corrective action. You just have to wait for the auditor to find it to actually lend weight. That's not management commitment at all, and it's a poor food safety culture. And I think we've all kind of experienced that a little bit, and it's a little disheartening. But all you can do is document it and follow up on it, and let's hopefully close those cars.
We received a couple other questions, but before I tackle them, if anyone has any questions specifically related to internal auditing, we'd be happy to receive them in the Q&A. Other than that, if there's other kinds of questions, our team members are available to answer any. I will pop their emails in the chat. So if you have anything you think of later, or that isn't necessarily related to internal auditing, but you know, it's still you still need an answer, or at least want a better direction, feel free to let us know. So one of the questions is, what should I do before I load a food container for export? Is it a requirement to have a CFI agent for inspections?
I think you'd have to check with CFIA on that one. I don't know, and it depends on, there's a lot of factors to play there. It depends on what the product is, where it's going, what those export requirements are for the country that you're sending it to. Yeah, I mean, there's directions on the CFIA website on what you require for exporting product. So I would imagine that would be listed in those requirements.
Yeah, certain products require export certificates and sign-offs, so it will be dependent on the product for sure.
Thanks. Do you have anything else to add, Shelly, or Elaine, before we wrap it up?
Another thing I just wanted to bring up is a lot of people also think you only have to do the internal audit once a year, but it depends on the risk of that component of your food safety system as well. So if you know it's something risky, say it's allergens and you have lots of allergens and potential cross contact, you may want to audit that section more than once a year. But the bare minimum is once annually.
Or if you put a new process in and you want to let it kind of marinate a little bit and get itself implemented, and then go back and check to make sure that it actually makes sense. I mean, if it's a food safety risk, don't leave it too long. But, you know, just see if what's written is accurate. And then if you want to do a double check, like every quarter even, to make sure what you wrote is being followed, that's also a good idea. And that wouldn't take long. Most of the time, if you break this all up, it doesn't take very long at all. If you leave it all the last minute, you're going to be a solid week. So I don't recommend that at all. I've seen internal audits done, you know, 1 week and the audit's next week. You can't fix that stuff. I mean, it's just, you know, and it's sad when that happens because the auditor's going to pick it up.
What if you do like you have one facility and produce different products at different times of year? Do you have to do the process for each product you make, or how does that work? It's just me wondering.
Yeah.
You're going to look at all of them. So if you have a HACCP plan for ice cream, you're going to look at the ice cream process. If it's milk, you're going to look at the milk process. If it's cheese and crackers, you're going to look at the cheese and cracker process. So you have to audit all the different HACCP plans at your facility, the different process flows, and so on. And another example is like when I talked about auditing based on risk, if you're a facility that has a revolving door for your employees, it's a good idea to be looking at your training program more frequently. Are you ensuring that the training records are there and signed off? Are you training them each and every time? It does get hard when employees are coming and going, and we do know that that can be a problem for some folks.
That's also a normal non-conformance for sure. A lot of people do get hit on that training. It's because even seasonal workers, like you're bringing in, you might get the first batch that comes in, but then you get extra ones and you might miss those. It does help with your internal audit to make sure double check that you're put a focus on those programs that are causing you the headaches, for sure.
Yeah, great. We actually just got a question in the chat about seasonal production. So for example, like crab processing or lobster processing that is just at certain times of year. How does that work, I guess?
So you can always audit the parts that don't require you to be observing something on the downtime. So if it's a seasonal section, you can be looking at, say, the statement, the letter of commitment from senior management. You can be looking at that aspect. Is it still meeting the requirements? Is it posted where it's supposed to be? You can be looking at any of those sections that's not specific to the processing. But when it comes time to process the crab or the lobster or what have you, you need to do those pieces of the internal audit as it is happening. But you can do the internal audit on the downtime, and it makes sense to do that.
Certain aspects of it for sure that don't require you to see what's going on. The other thing is if your season just started, you really can't audit your records. So you might give it a little bit, you might do the procedures at the start, or like give it a couple weeks and then do it. Stagger out your internal audit so it's not all at once. You do have to cram it in a shorter season, and this Canada Gap, actually, people that are certified Canada Gap run into this problem. Some of them only have like a month. So you kind of have to do your self-assessment really quick, but there's parts of it you can do before you actually start producing that, you can close off. It's just a matter of knowing when those are and scheduling those in and taking care of them as it comes before your audit.
Great, thank you so much. Just gonna pop our presentation back up. All right. So thank you everybody for joining us. I'm just gonna share a look at some of the services we offer here at Perennia. Our quality and food safety team, there isn't just Elaine and Shelly, we have a whole team, and they help with assessments, so self-assessments, reassessments as well, plan development and implementation, coaching. We have lots and lots of training sessions coming up, including 2 more free webinars in the next few weeks, so make sure you check out our website. We also offer regulatory assistance. Our product development team and our regulatory food safety team also work really closely with our quality and food safety team so that you can have the best and safest products you can for your customers. Shelly or Elaine, do you want to go over quality and food safety services more in depth?
So, Carolyn, you basically hit on all the things that we do. Also, just to let everyone know, we are the entire team is certified food safety and quality auditors through the American Society of Quality, so ASQ. Something new, not for the agriculture world, but for fish and seafood, we offer tech advice, which is free technical advice for all Nova Scotia food and beverage processors. So if you have a question that you want to have a chat about, if you want us to look over something, feel free. I did notice there was in the Q&A, it said I sent an email to Perennia before and nobody responded. I'd like to know which email you had sent that to. Our team normally responds within 24 hours to the inquiries. We have a food safety at Perennia email. We have a seafood at Perennia email. We have our own individual emails at Perennia. So if that's the case, I do ask that you send it to the food safety at Perennia email so that we can get back to you. And if we can't get to you right away, we will always send an email that says how long it will take us to get back to you.
Yes, thanks. Sorry, I was just typing out some URLs and emails in the chat here so that people could have them. All right, speaking of our technical advice, we don't just offer free technical advice for quality and food safety, but also in product development and now seafood product development and seafood food safety. So I have the URLs there in the chat. I'm really excited about this.
So
Yeah,
are
so
we.
you guys have, oh, sorry, Elaine.
Yeah, so are we, right, Shelly? Shelly's so excited.
Yes, we're like, let's talk. If anyone has any questions in regards to quality and food safety, feel free to contact us. You do have direct access to our team as well as others within Perennia. Carolyn did show you our services. So it's not just quality and food safety. We have the regulatory food safety team. We have product development and commercialization. We have the agricultural team. We have the seafood team. So some of the things we can talk about is problem solving and troubleshooting. Are you having an issue with production? Are you having an issue with quality? Are you having an issue with CFIA or meeting those requirements? Any general quality and food safety questions you might have. Maybe you want us to take a quick peek at an SOP you might have just to say, hey, am I on the right page or did I miss the boat? You've had a nonconformity through a third-party audit or an inspection, and you just want us to help talk you through it and look at doing a root cause analysis. Many people, when they have nonconformities, they literally will copy and paste what the problem was as their root cause, and that's not how you do a root cause. any general questions in regard to the preventive controls or your HACCP plan, we can take a look to see, are you on the right page? Or if you have customer regulatory or certification uncertainties, let us know. We are here to help.
Yeah, and this is just a list as an example. If you have anything else that doesn't quite fit into this list, please let us know and we'll do our darndest best to help.
Yeah.
And all of our resources are created based on pain points. So the more we hear from industry, the better it is so that we can develop the resources for you folks. Carolyn just brought up the training courses. So this is the roster for 2025. We have root cause analysis coming up. It's actually February the 11th, so that's the wrong date. February the 11th is for root cause analysis. We have internal auditing skills. So for those of you who are on today's webinar and would like to further your internal auditing skills, feel free to register for that course. We have specific HACCP training for the seafood industry. So that's our seafood food safety awareness and HACCP. We have developing and implementing your preventive controls, as well as developing a HACCP plan. We have HACCP refresher, senior management training. We also have free webinars. So there will be another webinar coming up January 29th, and that is on what to expect during third-party audits. So today we talked about doing internal audits and what the best practices are, but on January 29th, we are going to go through what to expect when you are being audited. Also, February 27th, we have a risk management for the food establishments. So where we talk about how do you do a risk assessment, what foods are different risks, and how CFIA are, looking at risks as well.
And coming up April 1st, tentatively, we're looking at opening up the Food Ventures program again for Nova Scotia registered farms and agri-food businesses who have head offices here in Nova Scotia. So please apply. If you run into any barriers, please reach out. We will walk you through it. You can get support for technical support, resources, and training. This webinar today was recreated based on the Food Ventures funding, cost shared funding for any of our perennial services as well. So please reach out and put your application in. It's not a hard process. I'm pretty sure it's a 1-page, if not a couple-page application.
And I just noticed another question that came through, and it was asking about if things are recorded. Paid training sessions are not recorded. They are instructor-led. However, all of the free webinars and the webinars that we do are recorded and available on our YouTube channel.
And I also want to mention that through our Perennia Academy, we have a 7-part course called The Fundamentals of Food Safety, which is a really great resource if you're just, a startup or getting into food and beverage manufacturing or processing, producing. So those are available. They're not very expensive, and you can watch them over and over again if you like. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next webinar next week. That's January 29th. You can sign up on our website. If you have any other questions later on, feel free to send them to our team. There's info@perennia.ca, or Elaine and Shelly's emails are in the chat there. So safe food for
and food safety at Perennia. We have a lot of emails. You can contact us anywhere.
We do. We just love to talk.
Yeah, we do. And just give us a holler and we'll see what we can help.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone, for attending. Take care.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.